everybody. Thanks so much for joining us here at Primary Sources. We are looking forward to another great round with our guests today. And to get us underway while everyone is gathering, I want to take a look at a few things to get our head in the right place. And of course, we're going to try to get this back to where it should start. That's always a good way to begin. All right. So, getting underway. Take two. Oftentimes, as creatives, we seek a tranquil place to renew and restore. And something that we often come across are boundaries, things that line our world, that dot our spaces as we move across the world. Images of fencing and barriers. They're used decoratively or perhaps often to confine or mark a boundary, to enclose something in some way. Some guards are there to protect us, to help us to remain safe. Again, to keep us safe. Some things out and some things in. These fences have served different purposes, depending on what our needs are. And oftentimes when they're that intense, they're often a barrier, something that can bar passage or obstruct progress or access to where we're intending to go, placing some sort of limit or boundary. Some barriers need to be broken. We are in the centennial of women getting the right to vote, and it was a long journey, but finally, other barriers where Aletha Rogers broke barriers for the tennis world by breaking racial barriers and spatial barriers, where we push beyond the limits of what we know and head off to explore other parts of our world. Boundaries are something that indicate limits or a limiting, defining line in our world. And oftentimes, whether it's things that limit us, could be sometimes limited resources and just being able to get the job done. Time constraints or deadlines oftentimes are challenging for someone who is a creative, trying to work and accomplish on something. We also find ourselves with financial limits and challenges. Budgets are confining sometimes, but we push ever forward. And sometimes there are boundaries that might be an overwhelming sense of size, scope, and scale of the challenge that's ahead of us, or maybe a self-imposed boundary of getting a sense of limitations within our own capabilities or our own smallness. These limitations can sometimes just be right within our reach, to step beyond and to find something entirely new, something entirely creative beyond that line or boundary. And we need to push. We need to press upon or against a thing with force sometimes to move it away, to move things in the direction that we feel they need to be. And we see signs of that all around us in nature, pushing beyond the boundaries of what seemingly might be there, heading to something a bit beyond where we've been and what we've known. And as artists and creatives, this really is one of our main roles, to remain boundless, having no bounds, vast, unlimited, to move beyond. And that's something that once we push past these limitations, in whatever way we can as creatives, we're really then unlimited. No wall or barrier can hinder us. And suddenly we are boundless and we can accomplish what needs to be done, the impossible sometimes. Our guest today is pretty versed with that concept. He's been confronted with the impossible on a number of counts within his career and working on so many great classic stories coming from the Pixar teams and pushing boundaries in areas on the screen and in the written form for a number of years. He is the writer behind the renowned Ratatouille from Pixar and writer-director on a number of other pieces that we know, including Your Friend the Rat, and currently working on some really exciting projects we're going to be exploring in with his own company, the Philharmonia Fantastique and the Inventor. So I am really looking forward to sharing some time here with our guest today, Jim Capobianco. Thank you so much, Jim, for joining.
Hey, hi Mindy. Thank you. Thanks everybody. Hi everybody out there in CTN world.
Thanks so much for being here. It's great. We appreciate it. I know you are incredibly busy. You're currently in production.
Yeah, we're getting going. We're ramping up. We just finished a Kickstarter campaign and was super successful. And I want to thank anyone out there who contributed to the campaign. And we're so overwhelmed by the support and the outpouring of good wishes and will. And we're really excited to have all of you on the journey. And we'll be sending some new updates very soon. So hold on to your hats and glasses, and we're in for a wild ride. It's going to be fun.
That's
So
exciting.
I have,
Well, as a creative, you're sort of a polyglot. You're all over the place with what you do as a writer, director, producer now, and
mhm.
sort of just all around creative guy. Where do you, just to get us underway and into the swim of this, where do you see sort of the heart and soul of visual storytelling? Where do you step off? How do you step into that?
Well, for me personally, I think I approach everything from story development, and my background being in storyboarding and developing films that way through for animation. um, I always find that's my way into the material, is just what images do I see that I kind of want to get out there into the world, and how does it emotionally connect to me. So to me, that's the visual storytelling aspect. So even writing scripts, it's just more of a means to get to the visual end of things. It's just faster sometimes to write things down, but then I find it's not. It's sort of an anemic, not a very great place to live in for a visual medium like film. So it's like you have to kind of get through that process to get to the meatier part of what we're going to see up there, because a script is all words. It's a literary medium, not really a cinematic medium. So to me, the process of storyboarding, drawing, sketching, getting those ideas down and seeing what these things in my head can actually be in reality. um, I don't think I'm the greatest draftsman either. So sometimes when I see that thing in my head and then I start to put it down on page, it's not exactly the way I would like it to be. So then I need help. But sometimes I find the shorthand I find, or the simplicity, I might translate that idea down to. Um, it actually is better, because I think simple is always a better way to go.
Less is more.
Yes, less is more. It's true.
Well,
So
this is such a, as I'm always telling my students, it's a visual medium anyway. We are shown a story. We aren't necessarily told a story. Dialogue is
exactly,
there to support. So it's got to
exactly.
be a little strange. I mean, you bring to it your with your background in terms of animation and visual storytelling. It's interesting that you go to the imagery first and then to the written word. Is that
Yeah, I think because that's where I get inspired by. It's not. I mean, I might read something that inspires me, and then I see it. I think we all do that. We'll see that in our head, and we'll play the movie in our brains. Um, But to me, the reality is once you put it down on paper, or you get outside with a camera, if you were filming live action stuff, then it's like getting starts to become a concrete reality. Because if it's just in your head or on the page, I mean, unless you're writing a novel or something, it's not real yet, and it needs to start to become more concrete. And to me, it's only through the visual uh, mediums we have to explain that we get there.
You mentioned something too about uh, recognizing your own limitations and going off to find
For
out
sure.
support. There's a boundary to push past.
Yeah.
Getting comfortable with that. Do you kind of, based on the story you're choosing, you want to tell, are you've got sort of your go-to Rolodex of artists who could encapsulate what you're looking for, or talk a little bit about how that.
That process is well, yeah, I have I have a lot of people I've met through my career, a lot of people I love working with and friends. And then that group is kind of growing all the time, meeting new people. I mean, the internet is a great resource for that, LinkedIn and all that, finding new artists to work with and to go give people a chance and see what they can do. I yeah, so depending on the project and the idea, I'll think about what artists might be stronger suited to that look or that medium, and then approach them and see what they'll bring to it. I mean, I have a certain level that I know what I can do, but then it's like, and I'm always trying to learn and improve. But I feel like the best thing about the process of animation and doing these creative endeavors is teaming up with other artists and and creating something beyond what you could even imagine.
That's, I think, half the fun of it too. Is
Yeah, it's super fun.
new stew that you can brew with what you're doing.
Hmm.
Um, Going back to your early story work,
Hmm.
Lion King and some of the earlier, and then your early days at Pixar, what are some of the experiences and sort of lessons learned in those processes where at that time in your career where you've had to push boundaries and that's helped to propel you to where you are today?
Well, definitely, like with The Lion King and starting out, that was my first feature film to storyboard. And I was I guess, an apprentice story artist, or I can't remember what they called us back then. But I think the boundary I was pushing against was my own insecurity and, naivete of being a storyboard artist and learning the process, and working with all these greats like Brenda Chapman and Bernie Mattinson and all these wonderful people, and being thrown into that mix and being expected to you know do the work that they were doing. So I think that's a boundary as far as just me getting over that hurdle and learning and stepping up. I had a great mentor, and Bernie Mattinson was my mentor. Just so fantastic. It was the ultimate. It was my Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he was really really fit that mold. And he gave me this great bit of advice because I was working on the scene where Simba puts his hand. Well, he'll eventually. I came up with the idea, but he puts his hand in the paw and all that stuff, and he is the last scene before he's going to see before his dad goes into the stampede and all that stuff. So I was just given this little paragraph, and not a script page or anything. It was just this little paragraph description of what the scene was about, and it was basically Simba getting reprimanded for going to the elephant graveyard. And I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I was like, where do I start? Where do I begin? And so I went to Bernie and I was like, Bernie, what do I do with this? And he was like, Jim, calm down, calm down. Just start with what you know. And that little bit of advice I've taken with me forever, because and we just went down. He's like, they're lions, they're, that. So I thought about it, and I was like, okay, well, I know this is the last time he's going to see his dad. The scene was similar to the next time he would see his dad would be the ghost. So I was like, well, maybe scene should tie into that scene. So those elements then helped me develop that sequence into what it was. And I wrote it down, just like on a piece of paper, and sketched it out, and then pitched it to Roger Allers and Rob Minkoff. And then they were like, you nailed it. This is the scene. And then I worked with the writers and we honed it a little bit more. And then it's pretty much the way I dreamed it up. So, so I think having those people around you you can lean on help you get over those walls, right? They help you get through those boundaries. And so I always feel like we stand on these giants, and we get to where we are because of them. And I think it's important to remember that.
Absolutely. Well, and it's interesting. It seems like that was a real pivotal point for you too, because it perhaps telegraphed your future.
It did. I mean, yeah, Don Hahn would tell me, he's like, yeah, we're sort of basing Lion King on a lot of your ideas. It's like, what? No, you're not. But yeah, there was a few moments on that film where I was like, hey, what if we did this? I think because I was sort of the new guy. At that time, I was the youngest storyboard artist at Disney. And I think I just came in with these fresh ideas. A lot of them had been on the film for a long time. And and I think sometimes you could get stuck in stuff where you don't quite see things new. And if they're willing to listen, then I'd throw out a lot of ideas. And I was young and really full of a lot of energy and a lot of piss and vinegar, and just like, I'm going to change the world of animation. So I would just speak my mind and get ideas out there, and some would fly and some wouldn't, so I wasn't really too intimidated by just trying to get in the mix of it.
Well, a great training ground, most definitely.
Certainly was. Great people to work with.
Yeah.
I mean, Brenda was my first
wow.
Head of story, so she was tremendous to work with, and
not a bad film to start on either.
No, lucked out there.
Your first time up at the plate, my gosh. Well, and I think it speaks a lot too to listening to those around you and learning from those around you. Certainly a little
for sure.
little confidence in what you have to offer, but listening to those who are there to help. And I think that's an important part of any creative process, is cultivating that kind of environment. Have you carried that through in other projects?
Oh yeah, I mean, I always, I think as artists we're always full of a lot of ego and we want our voice out there, and but I think it's important to also let that go and bring in other voices, and know that you don't always have to listen to what they are saying and do what they're saying, but I feel like you need to take it in and maybe examine it and sort of I mean, definitely there's been times I've been challenged and I feel it like this moment raise up, like, what do they know? And then I'll take it away with me, and then 2 days later I'm like, wait a minute, they were right. That's a good idea. And then it would make me think about it in a new way, or why did they bring that up? And I think that a lot of that's my story training and working in stories so much. I used to tell my students, I'd be like, to be a storyboard artist, you have to leave your ego at the door. You really have to come in, and it's one of the toughest jobs in animation, in that you have to create these idea, or you're giving something to develop, or storyboard out. A script page is the storyboard out, and you have to put in everything you have and believe that it's the way it should be, because you need to pitch it and sell it and go, this is how it is. And then once you do that, and then it usually gets eviscerated, you go through this challenge, you need to then pick up all the pieces and do it all again. And so it's a really brutalizing process. So I think the best story artists are able to like give it their all, take the hits, and come back again and just constantly do it. It's the ones that I've seen don't work out are the ones who can constantly challenge this the like the direction the director wants to go and stuff, and just constantly is like not budging, and then they don't last long because it's like you're not going to get anywhere with that because it's all a team sport, and you need to kind of, sometimes you don't see the whole picture like the director does, and you need to kind of let it go. Sometimes they're right. I mean, sometimes they're right, and maybe the director is wrong, but they have to go on the director or the writers or somebody, they have to go on their own journey as well with this process. So maybe 6 months later, a year later, they're going to come around to that idea you had that they said was crap at that time, but then they come around to it. They'll claim it was their idea, but at least it got into the film.
Well, there's so many, it's an unusual process, but still an exciting process, taking so many great creative minds and talents and and perspectives. I mean, I
It is
that as artists we have to have our own voice, but then somehow corralling that and herding those cats in a way to create one extraordinary vision. And
yeah. Oh yeah.
Don't realize the challenges there. Let's move to your early Pixar days.
Okay.
I'm doing a lot of story work there
Mm-hmm.
on many great early classics, Bug's Life, and definitely on a little film called Ratatouille.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, talk about pushing boundaries. This one has always been a bit of when you look at the actual premise of this film,
Yeah.
a rat in a kitchen, and I will say at this time I was working in marketing and publicity to hear
How do you sell it?
about, right, exactly, how do we sell this? And remember thinking, wait a minute, this is in the hands of some remarkable artists. They're going to find a unique way to tell this premise.
Well, you have an open mind that way. That's good. No, everybody thought that.
Talk about being in a room all alone.
Yeah. Well, Jan Pinkava came up with this idea. He was the original director and creator of the film, and when I was the first story person, I was brought on as the head of story, and in a way, I was the first artist on the film in a sense of, instead of like some development artwork.
Back a good almost 10 years before the film finally came out, right? Almost.
Yeah, I see. I came in in
Was it?
2001. I
Yeah,
came on the film, and
not released till
yeah,
2009,
7, 8.
somewhere in there. Yeah.
Um, I was
uh,
on it for about five years. So I came on, and Jan handed me an outline of the film. He had been working with a writer, actually Irene Mecchi, who I had worked with on
yeah,
Lion King.
yeah.
Um, so he had just been working with her, and then I think they had different visions of it, and then she had just left the project, and then they had an outline, and I read the outline, and it had a lot of the elements that would end up in the film, but the main thing was it's a rat. It's about a rat. That's one of the big things. Who's going to cook? And that it takes place in France. And this is 2001, so this is the George W. Bush era. Didn't quite have 9/11 yet. This was right before that. But they were still this anti, like, French thing and the freedom fries and all this stuff. So I was like, how is this going to play in the middle of America as far as the France thing? But then the bigger issues were like a rat cooking. So how do you make a film about a rat appealing, and how do you make it exciting, cooking exciting? There
Yeah.
were some cooking shows at this time, and Anthony Bourdain had just written Kitchen Confidential. We use that as sort of a bit of um, a bit of a guide, and we even brought him in to talk to us and discuss this a little bit. The idea of, because it gave us some little signals of that world, like the idea that the cooks are from all over the world, chefs and people who work in kitchens. Lots of times they're the people who are, struggling, underserved, people who have had crime in their life and drugs and all this stuff, and they're trying to get out of that, and they're working hard. And there's a pirate aspect to them. There's this idea that they're because in the great scene in the film where they describe the different cooks, and she
Yeah.
goes through the different ones and he kills them with his thumb and all stuff. That was a Brad came up. That's so good. The all that stuff, and that they're surrounded by knives and fire, and they're often burned and all these things. So all those elements, we were like, okay, we could draw on that. So that would help with the cooking aspect. And then the rat part was like, I knew we could design animation with rats to look really appealing and charming. And so to me, that wasn't as big a deal. But we always dealt with, there was like a producer at Pixar who was always a little bit like, oh, that rat movie and stuff. And so it was definitely a project we, talking about, and in a way, Ratatouille, even at Pixar, was not really, it was so there's so many other projects ahead of us as we were developing it. And it was really the outlier project, and it was being developed by Jan, who's from Czechoslovakia and then grew up in England. And they always called it the film that was the European sensibility film, or it was, and it definitely always had this sort of outlier status to it, and even the storytelling that we were putting into it. So when he gave me that outline and I read these crazy things, like a rat cooking in France, I was like, this is nutty. This is a wackadoodle idea. And I went in and I said, I know how we approach this, Jan. And he goes, Jim, how do we do it? And then I said, it's like Monty Python. This is just like the most ludicrous concept. And I think we have to just lean into that idea. And he goes, excellent. Yes. Because we both loved Monty Python, and we would riff on stuff. And he introduced me to things too, like Father Ted and stuff that were just really fun. And so we were like, let's try to put some of that sensibility into it. And then that's how like Remy driving Linguini and driving Linguini, all the crazy stuff in there. We were able to kind of lean into that a little bit more, and so I think it gave us sort of an avenue to follow.
You talked about it a little bit. There are some really dark themes here. There's sort of lots of knives and just the environment that we're in, and I think that's such a great film for environment. It largely takes place within that restaurant and in the kitchen of the restaurant, but what an incredibly detailed world that just comes alive visually through audio. So much in there. But
developing it early, talking about breaking boundaries, just in story development, we broke boundaries on that film. Maybe at the time I thought it was for good, and I don't know now, maybe it was for ill, but it was the first film at Pixar drawn digitally in storyboards, because at that point Mark Andrews on Incredibles had started they used Photoshop a little bit to do backgrounds and some stuff, but Pixar had invented a tool called Pitch Doctor where we could actually pitch storyboards digitally, and it had not been used. It was developed for Pete Doctor, that's why it's called Pitch Doctor, to make short films. So I saw that and I said, hey, let's use this on Ratatouille. And one of the issues we always had with storyboarding, which at the time seemed maybe was a problem, but it really isn't, was you'd pitch on these giant boards, right? And you'd do this thing, and it would be a big show, and you'd pitch it to everybody, and the guy or that time it was mostly all guys, but you'd pitch this, and depending on their ability, they would make everybody laugh and stuff and get them, oh, this is great, the sequence is awesome, it's so funny. And then you put it into editorial and it would sink like a stone because it didn't have that guy pitching it. So I was like, well, if we eliminated that and we pitched digitally through this thing, we'd get to that process quicker. And so we instituted it we tried it out on Ratatouille and we started doing it that way. And then we could talk about that later, but it's a slippery slope of, I think, what we've lost from that. But it also was we were able to get the storyboards into editorial faster and stuff like that. So we first use it there. And then the kitchen thing, we brought in a previs to previs the kitchen because I realized, wow, this is a set we're going to be in a lot. And I was friendly with one of the layout artists and he wanted to do previs. He thought if we could build in a pre-visualization of the set early, we could start to move the camera around and get shots and everything. So we built the kitchen early, and that's why that kitchen looks so amazing, is because we built it in the storyboarding process. And we were able to do that. And then that never really caught on at that time because there was a lot of political factions of the layout department got worried that it was moving into story and all these other things. And I think that shifted down. A lot of people use previs and everything since then. But this was early days. I mean, this was 2002.
So definitely breaking ground.
Yeah, it broke ground.
Did you, with the food too? I mean, it's one of the most innovative. You guys really did some great detail on the.
Yes, lots of research went into. We went to France and would go to 3-star restaurants to do our research. It was really tough. It was actually, I mean, you say that to people and people are like, oh my God, that's amazing. But we would have lunch and dinner at these 3-star restaurants, and you're not supposed to do that. The food is so rich and so it takes a long time. It's hours of a meal. It's many courses and all that stuff. And after I got so sick because it was just so too much. But it was amazing to go to Paris. I mean, it's first world problems. It was amazing to go to Paris and research that. And we went behind, and get behind the scenes of these famous restaurants and film the cooks and do all that stuff. It was great. The food was hard. I mean, I know technically to make it look good, like Ratatouille, here's the main dish of the movie. And we would storyboard it, and Ratatouille, everybody knows this, right? It does not look like it does in the movie. It is a stew. So we had to do a drawing of a stew, and it's this gloppy thing, and it's here it's supposed to be the most amazing dish in the film, and it looks, it just looks like a mess. So how do you make it pretty? And then we hit upon, because up here we have this wonderful Mr. Thomas Keller and his French Laundry, which was another restaurant we were able to go behind the scenes in. And they brought him on to kind of design Remy's Ratatouille. So that's the one that ends up in the movie, is Thomas Keller's Ratatouille. And they ended up serving it at the French Laundry for a little while. But we needed to find a visual. Again, back to visuals. It was what's the visual language of the food in there?
Right. And that actually becomes a character in the film in many ways too.
For sure, yeah.
So important to keep that stylized. Well, that lent you to expanded your repertoire then as a director for Your Friend the Rat.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about, again, another challenge. Essentially, sort of a feel-good piece about how lovable and friendly rats are.
Well, after working on a film for that long about rats, you sort of learn to love them. Well, it came out of all the research we did on rats and stuff, and we had done a lot of research on kitchens and stuff, but also rats too, what they're all about. And so, some of it's sort of filtered into the film, but it was all these really interesting things about the history, and I just love history. And to me, I thought, well, this would make a fun, like, educational edutainment piece, like a Ward Kimball,
Yes.
Man in Space sort of idea. And I always wanted to do a film like that. So they were looking for DVD ideas and extras, and so but they didn't have the resources. Like, the resources of the company were strapped for the features, the doing, the finishing Ratatouille and all that stuff. So um, I was like, well, me, and I knew Teddy Newton was developing the credits at the time, and they were going to be done in this 2D style. And I was like, I wonder if we could do this in 2D. So I pitched it to Brad Bird, and I kind of knew I kind of felt he might go for it because he loves 2D and Disney and all stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I pitched it to him, and he did love it, but we had to kind of sell the company on doing the short, and they didn't really have the resources to do a full short with 2D artists. But and even at the time, I think they were going to outsource the credits to another company, like Baxter Studio at the time or something. So, but then what happened was they ended up doing the credits in-house, and I was able to leverage that and use some of that team and the knowledge they gained from that. And then we ended up pulling together a little unit to do 2D animation at Pixar, and again, broke boundaries in the sense of, it was a very CG oriented studio. I mean, it was very much like we do computer animation, and to kind of carve that in there with Teddy, we kind of really tried to establish a kind of 2D arm. We were hoping it would kind of grow more, but it didn't. I mean, I was able to do the Wall-E end credits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. About that.
Leveraged it for that. I mean, because Andrew Stanton saw what I did for Your Friend the Rat, and then he was like, you have to do my end credits. And I was like, okay, anything to keep doing this. This is fun.
How that evolved. It's got such a great, even little evolution within it, just in terms of style. What,
Yeah, we played I mean, it even has stop motion in it. It's the only time Pixar ever did stop motion animation
really?
in
Oh my
there.
God.
Yeah, it's the Mountie sequence.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, what happened was, because they didn't have the resources, we did it with 2D, and then eventually, though, then the artists started freeing up, and they said, okay, you could use some CG. So then we put the bookends in there. So originally that was all going to be animated in 2D. And then there was an issue with one of the ideas later, I forget, with the maps and stuff, and I was trying to make sure the style, like, I wouldn't repeat myself. And then I was working out one time I ever worked out, I was working out in a gym, and I came up with this. It hit me like, what if we did the globe where we see where all the rats are in, like, as, like, I wanted to just get a school globe, and we would do that in stop motion and glue rats on it. But I learned that would be too tiny to work with, like a school. So they had to actually build this globe to do it. And it's Pixar too, so they went, let's go whole hog, and they started this. So anyway, I pitched it to the producer. I'm like, hey, I want to do that scene in stop motion. And she was like, wait, what? How are we going to do that? And I was like, oh, there's people who know all about it here. Because there was a lot of people there from Nightmare Before Christmas who knew how to do, and ILM. They had worked on the Star Wars, even the original Star Wars films. So I think there were people who knew what to do. And it was fun because everybody was so excited to do those things again. And that was fantastic. This was also at the time when the studio was bought. So it was very interesting because I think there was a sense of, like, and I remember my producer, her name was Ann Brills. She was wonderful. Let me do a lot of stuff. And I remember she had been, saddled with the idea, okay, we're going to outsource this project. But then all this stuff was happening, and morale was really low. And I said, I think it would be a terrible thing to ship this off. It would be the first project Pixar ever did outside of Pixar. And I was like, I just think morale wise, this would hurt. So I feel like we should figure out a way to do it in house. And then we pitched the film to the animators. I showed the story reel to them. And the story reel I did very detailed, like worked out the way some of the animation would move because I knew it would be very designy animation, like the Ward Kimball stuff.
Mhm.
And it's hard to explain that. You have to kind of show it. So I boarded it very detailed with Jeff Pigeon, the great Jeff Pigeon, and I did it. And we showed it to the animators, and I remember it was in their thing called the Jungle Pod where they have a projector and they show this, and all of them crammed in there. Like, what are we seeing? Like, well, this is gonna be short for the DVD and show it. And they exploded like in this eruption of like, we're gonna make this here. What? They couldn't believe it. They were like, and what, in 2D? And I'm like, well, I hope so. Go talk to Anne. And they did. They lined up outside of her door, and the had an animation, the manager of animation's door to go, I want to work on this project. I want to work on this project. So I think this overwhelming like response from people who had like this pent up desire to do something a little different, um, was there, and that helped the cause to make that film. So it was a blast. It was a whole year from pitching it to Brad to getting it out the door, and it was probably the best year I had at Pixar. It was so fun.
And continued on to, again, marked another turning point in your career. You continued
Mhm.
doing more of that.
Yeah, I got labeled as the 2D guy. And that was not a great road at Pixar because there wasn't a lot of 2D opportunities. So.
Make yourself as unique as possible. Um, so, in that same style, you continued on with the Wall-E credits. I mean,
Hmm.
that really evolves so beautifully in terms of style
Yeah.
and.
Andrew came to me with he goes, I want you to do these credits. We have three things we have to do. We have to basically solve the story of the film because we had this test audience that went, the film is great, but it ends really depressing. It's so sad. They're all going to die. Uh, so he was like, you have to finish the story in the credits. And we have this concept. Kevin O'Brien, one of our other great story artists at Pixar, came up with this idea to use art history and track it through art history. So he's like, I want you to take like this evolution. He gives me this art history book that he like had as a student or something. And he puts it on my lap. And art history books are this thick thing. He goes, here, use this. I was like, what? For like 3-minute credits? Okay. So yeah, so we had to solve the story, follow art history, and then put people's names in there. So because it is credits.
That's right.
So it was fun to do. We had to figure out what pieces of art to put in there, and it turns out like the earlier pieces are easy because they're just more iconic because you have hieroglyphics and
Yeah.
Greek art, and nobody really knows who the Greek artists are. But once you get to the Renaissance period, whatever you do, people are like, "Oh, that's Leonardo da Vinci, or that's Rembrandt," and like people can pick out the artists. So we had to kind of find, like, as we got later, like what were the sort of iconic movements in art, and that we could pull upon and make like visually interesting to the audience and graphically like gettable. So yeah, that was a lot of fun project. I was able to bring on a lot of the artists from You're from the Rat into that. So I felt like we were developing this unit, and we kind of I thought it could be neat to have like a titles unit at Pixar that we would end up continuing to do that. But then there was so much going on at the studio at the time and shifting changes and stuff because it had bought it by Disney at that point. So.
Was really a great stroke of genius, just pushing that. And it did exactly as you intended. I remember seeing that for the first time, and again, other marketing stories about that film that people didn't see the vision of it. And finally, then when it released, I had vowed to others in the area I was working in that it would take the Oscar, and indeed it did.
Yeah,
They were
it's a great. I love it. It's a good film.
so wonderful because again, it pushes boundaries. It seems like such an unlikely story idea, and yet you guys have a magic way of making it work. And
That period of Pixar is just really a great group of movies. I think
oh,
there's starting with like The Incredibles and Ratatouille, and then Wall-E, Up. It's
innovation.
just really that little core group. If you're going to turn anybody onto Pixar, that if you had to, I think that period would be it's a just golden age.
Well, it's always interesting to track progress. And so you left Pixar
Hmm.
and then went on to, I want to jump to one of your more semi recent projects, Mary Poppins Returns. Now, this is for the animated sequence of the,
Yes,
and you know, again, stepping into quite a challenge.
yes, it was.
This is a that is beloved by generations. My gosh, I mean, that's like, when I heard, I'll speak for myself, when I heard that there was going to be a sort of quasi prequel to this film
Mhm.
or even or sequel to it,
Right.
I thought, oh no, oh, careful. And if anybody's going to do it, it better be Disney. Uh,
Well, that was my same reaction. So I had left Pixar, and then I got a call from Jonas Rivera, the great Pixar producer now running the company. He called me and said, "Hey, there's this project that came through that we can't do here, but because you're left, you could do it." And I was like, "What? What is it?" And I came in to meet with him, and he told me. Then he would tell me, he wouldn't tell me on the phone. And he goes, "It's Mary Poppins. They want to do a sequel to it." And I was like, "What? Why?" It's like my first reaction. And he goes, "Yeah, I know that was my reaction too." But he says, "Maybe, I don't know, maybe we could do it right." And I said, "Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I guess there's a lot of factors involved." He said, "Well, we're putting together a little team of story people from Pixar to go down and just meet with Rob Marshall. Why don't you come with us? And we'll sort of present you as like a possible lead for it." And I think at the time too, they just thought I would storyboard it or something. Um, so I went down. We met with Rob, and the first thing we did was we looked at the original, the Jolly Holiday sequence, and it was the first thing we put that in. And at the end of it, Rob goes, "What if we what if we did it in this flatter style?" And he didn't really have the language of like what, like, to him I think animation was animation. It's like all this very fun, he loves anime. He actually always attributed the success of Chicago to Beauty and the Beast because it came out kind of soon after that, because he believed that people had started to accept musicals in film again because of the animated musicals at that time. So people then saw Chicago, which was a straight up musical, that were more accepting of it, and that put him on the map. He won like all these Academy Awards for it and stuff. And a lot of the people I worked with on Poppins still were with him from Chicago. So he goes, what do we do in this flatter style? And all of us were like, "Yeah, that's the way you have to do it. 2D hand drawn animation." And he's like, "Yes, 2D drawn animation. That's it. That's the way we do it." And we're like, "Of course." And then they played the songs for us. Mark Shaman played the songs for us, and they were good. They were really good. They weren't like, it wasn't like, "Oh, yeah, that's great, Rob." It was like, "Oh, these are really grabbed you." I grant they're not the Sherman Brothers, right? But they were still, really enjoyable. So it's like, check the boxes. I think Jonas and I and the rest of the team, we were all worried about, and at that point, but also the thing I realized in that room, it was all Pixar people. We were
hmm.
right across. We did this meeting at Disney across the street from the Disney Animation Building, and we had one guy, Dave Getz was there from Disney Animation, but There was no but story people from Disney Animation and stuff. So it was really weird. And I don't know why that was, but it turns out Disney Animation wasn't going to end up doing it because they do CG now, and they weren't. I guess if there was a will, there's a way. They would have retooled to do it for 2D, but it's just the big corporation of it. They didn't want to do that. So,
time constraints too with the film, and
maybe yes, scheduling. Who knows, right? There's a whole load of factors. So it was interesting because there was nobody had an idea of how we were going to do this. So walking to the back to the plane, the fly back north, Jonas, I go, Jonas, I can do this. And he's like, I know you can. And that was it. And that was next thing I would know. I was going to work on that project.
We do have the clip.
Okay, let's do it. This is great. This is Duncan Studios put this together from the DVD.
The king might be a crook. You know, when you think about the penguins dancing with Dick Van Dyke, it's like she has little backup boys. Look how funny they are. Wow.
The Royal Dalton Music Hall, please.
Great, everybody. You're doing fabulous.
We had to coordinate with the animators, the costume design, production design, all of that together.
Hi, guys. So nice to meet you.
We had Rob Marshall here to see all the hard work that's going into the animation.
Look at that. Wow.
What was fun was a lot of the animators, they'd never had live actors in with their animation. So we were all coming together from different worlds, trying to create something new.
You're doing such great work. Fantastic. Love it, guys.
Let's go, Clyde!
In the nursery, you were never by yourself. There was quite another world upon your
Oh, sweet. So fun. So wonderful. Look at that. Wow. This was one of the hardest parts, trying to figure out how do we understand that they're going up and over this bowl and into the world.
Yes,
it's a tricky one.
This dilly dynamical, simply ceramical Royal Dalton Bowl.
And you did it.
We did it. We did. Yeah, we figured out how to get over that bowl.
And
which was my idea, by the way. I'm to blame for that.
No, it was, I think, probably it's the one section of that film that just grabbed me, just hooked me. I think I was holding my breath because that was the magic and charm of the original. And again, another brilliant stroke of pushing boundaries creatively by Walt Disney with that decision to step into that animated world and blend that. It was initially intended to be fully live action and then embracing the two worlds. And it was just beautifully done, masterfully handled.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
A tight budget and tight time frame too, right? You guys were really crunching on this.
We were, yeah. I think Disney, the production saw it as a special effects scene. Even though all of us, Alonzo Rubacava, who was the animation producer, and Ken Duncan, I think we were all saying it's not an effects scene. It's gonna be more, and we had to keep pushing on it. And I mean, it as we were going on, it became a bit of a strain. But we got there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Duncan Studios they were fantastic. So because they didn't know where we'd make it, we went around the world basically and bid other studios, like Cartoon Saloon did a bid, and I know those guys really well, so we reached out to them. Even Sergio Pablos' studio, we talked to them, but they were getting ready with Klaus, which became a bit of our like, wait a minute, there's other 2D going on. Oh, that's great. Yay. But no, there's not enough artists anymore. So they were approached too. So, but then I had known Duncan, Ken, a little peripherally, not well, but from the days at Disney. And I knew about his studio. And then Brad Bird, again, he had just used them for the Iron Giant, couple of scenes they added there, and
restored, or the restored version.
The restored version. So I talked to him and John Walker, his producer, And they were like, yeah, they were great. You should talk to Ken and stuff. And Ken it was perfect because what it turned out to be, one, they were in Pasadena, so it wasn't like we had to go too far outside of the country. We didn't have to go outside the country at all. But it's beautiful down there. So we we were able to we knew all these well, Ken for one, and then myself, and then the artists we were able to bring in were from probably the closest we could get to the old guys, the 9 Old Men era, because these were the artists who worked on The Lion King and Beauty and the Beast and Tarzan, all these films of the next era. So all these people who came on, not all of them, we had some younger people too, but the core group were the as skilled of 2D animators we could find who could do this style, because that was the other thing, is we had to find 2D animators who could animate in this Disney 60s style. And it's and you go, well, it's animation, anybody could do animation. It's not. There's like a certain technique to it. And then the other awesome thing, and this was just a side bonus, was Duncan Studios does everything on paper. So it was like, whoa. And then I told Rob Marshall that. He was like, I don't know if he understood that, like, the reality of that's not done anymore. But I think he appreciated that it was, it was so close to the original that we could get. It was awesome. I mean, and it was because we could use, Duncan Studio could come on and do it. And they were fun to work with. It was great.
Yeah, a great group. I happened to be able to be there and stop by.
That's right. That's where we first met. You came with your book and you gave a signing. That was fantastic.
Yeah, it was great fun. And you could feel the energy, and you could feel the sort of the gravitas of the importance of the project. But yet we're back on paper, and we're doing this in the same method, the same manner as it was done decades prior, and it shows. It's stunning, beautiful work on that. So again, bravo, and we're grateful for the boundaries you pushed. In the interest of time, I want to move ahead to get to some of your other really more recent projects.
Okay.
Philharmonia Fantastique. This one speaks to my heart as a musician. Now, talk a little bit about how this project came about. We have a short clip.
Okay.
So you tell me if you feel you want to run the clip first and then talk.
Well, let me explain the project a little bit, because it's probably new to a lot of people listening, and then we can show the little clip, and it doesn't show too much from it, but this came to me. I'm really good friends with Gary Rydstrom, the great sound designer, and we worked together at Pixar. My office was right next door to his, and my wife Kim Collins ended up production managing his short Lifted, and so we've been good friends since then. So when I was on Poppins and was finishing up, he called me and said, hey, there's this project that a friend of mine named Mason Bates, who's a composer, pretty well-renowned modern symphony composer, wants to do a kind of update to, like, Benjamin Britten's Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra, sort of go through the orchestra in a modern way and kind of show the different pieces of it. Now, unlike Benjamin Britten's, which is narrated, this is not narrated. It's more like Fantasia, like a piece that's just music. And we just needed to kind of let the information sort of flow from there. And whether you get everything or not, it's kind of, we tried our best to, like, be as specific as we could, but it it's just like definitely the Fantasia is the closest to this. So Mary Poppins and Fantasia. So and we had a very low budget on it, and we needed to so 2D animation again seemed to be a good way to go in a more graphic sense, and also we needed kind of a character to kind of carry us through the story that we'd follow. And originally Mason wanted to have a little girl, like, open in like a classroom, and she's gonna show you about different musical instruments, a little melody or two whistle plunk and boom. But I was like, well, I think a girl, one, we have to, is it a white girl? Is it, it's like you start to get into this realm of exclusion, and it's also a girl or boy. So I thought, well, what if we created a character that's neither a girl nor a boy, and it's sort of our own entity? And then we came up with this idea of the musical sprite, and she sort of carries us through the story, and we follow somebody for the audience to kind of latch on to. So the clip we have is actually, I think, a moment with the sprite.
Yeah, let's take.
We're gonna take a look at that.
Matt, if we can jump to the sprite clip, thank you.
So just a little taste. And then the idea of the project is that it would play with a live orchestra at symphonies. And we were originally going to premiere it in Chicago this past April or March, and then at San Francisco Symphony in April. But obviously with COVID, it didn't happen. It hasn't happened yet. So we're still hoping to premiere it soon. And the idea is, well, we're going to film the premiere, which most likely will be Chicago, because it was funded by 4 or 5 symphonies, and then a little extra money from some other sources, but mainly from the symphonies. So and Chicago was one of the big. Mason has a great relationship with the Chicago Symphony, and they is their 100th anniversary this year, and this was to help like promote their children's programming and stuff like that. So we'll let you know. It'll premiere. It'll get there. It'll get out there. And the idea is we'll film the premiere, and then we'll make a video, a filmed version of it as well. That'll kind of cover, sort of, you could watch like on a Netflix or something like that eventually.
Well, what I loved about this piece, doing a little further research on it, you guys really did, again, break boundaries by going inside the instruments and
Yes.
kind of creating a different world. It was fascinating to see just even inside a bassoon and playing within that space creatively.
Yeah, that was one of the fun ideas originally for the project, was that we would go inside the instruments and just see what does it look like, what does sound do inside the instruments and stuff. So you saw a little taste of it there with the sprite, and how sound like reverberates and expands inside the cello and everything. So because of our budget and because of we weren't able to go through too many instruments, but the idea of kind of being able to go into different worlds that we don't normally get to go to. It's a really fun piece, and I'm really for the budget we had, I am so impressed by what we pulled off.
Yeah, it's very exciting. So keep us posted on that. We'll definitely
You bet. Yeah,
back and
we'll have to do some sort of CTN.
yeah, most definitely.
Premiere. Maybe we could do a more in-depth coverage of it with Gary and Mason.
Yeah, it would be great. A terrific panel event, because it's I really loved the notion and the flavor that you applied with it, going back to the toot whistle, plunk booms, and
Oh yeah,
some of those great,
Fantasia and all of it. Yeah, I can't get away from I don't know, tapping back into my favorite Disney films.
Not a bad boundary to break, I tell you.
That's fun.
I want to move to let's dive into your latest and
Okay.
big epic project, and you've got a little friend there next to you.
He is.
The Inventor. Now, this has had a long evolution from
Yes.
now. Talk a little bit about how the origins of this project and the process that got you to where we are right now with it.
So it's actually, I think the first CTN or maybe the second CTN, I actually showed the short film it was based on and gave a talk about it. It's not really based on the short film, but it's where the seed, the genesis of it is, I made a short film about Leonardo da Vinci called Leonardo, and it was all done in hand-drawn animation. I made it over 10 years while I was at Pixar, just off and on, and weekends whenever I could squeeze in some time, and had a few help from a couple of friends. And the after Ratatouille and Your Friend the Rat and the credits, Wall-E credits, I took a couple of months off and finished it up. I was having my second daughter, and I was like, let's just get it done. It released in 2009, and it went around, and at the different events like festivals and stuff, I'd get approached by parents who were like, I really loved your film, and my child did too. And I loved it in that it was entertaining and fun, but it also had this extra aspect to it where we can discuss Leonardo da Vinci. We could talk about these things, and it was like a window into this other world for my children and us. And I was like, why aren't more films made like this? And it made me kind of think, because I always thought so too. I'm like, well, there's so many great stories from history and everything that maybe if we could tap into that a little more. So I originally didn't want to make another Leonardo project because this took 10 years, and it was like, is my life going to be Leonardo da Vinci? But he had his life, I should have mine. And then I don't know, I started to like think about working on a feature, like writing a full feature on my own. And then I thought, well, I like this period. There's this period of Da Vinci's life where he leaves Italy and he moves to France. It's the end of his life, and it's for 3 years. And I was like, why? Like, what's that about? Like, he never knew France. He left his home country to go there. So dived in more to research that. And there's not a lot known about it, but that to me was intriguing. And then it sort of seemed like too, with a feature film, it's hard to do a story about somebody's entire life, and it's like not enough time. So I thought, well, maybe this bit of time is it's still a big chunk of time, but I can encapsulate it into a story for a movie. So started working on it, and then it just snowballed into becoming the film it is. It was interesting. I was trying to think of like, how does that gestation happen? And it just, I don't know, you plant the seed, you add a little water and some sunlight, and it just starts to grow into a giant oak tree.
It grows and then becomes consuming.
Yes. So now, here we are, and it's been, I guess it's been 10 years, 9 years of developing it and writing the script and rewriting the script and writing it again and writing it again. And then like trying to find money to make it, because the story is, it's definitely a different type of story than a typical Hollywood film or even a Pixar story. So in a sense, the closest story that Pixar ever made that is close to is something like a Ratatouille, where it's definitely like different in that, in its subject matter and stuff. So
we've got some imagery I want to walk through a little
oh
bit.
yeah, I can talk.
And we've also got some footage to share. So let's chat through some of these a bit.
So there's Leo looking out at that. So it all takes place, well, not all of it, but the main part of the film will take place in Amboise, France, which is where Leonardo moved to. And this at the time was one of the seats of the French government. And it opens with his old apprentice, Francesco Melzi, who was the keeper of all his drawings and stuff after he died. And Vasari shows up, who's a painter himself, but he also wrote the first kind of art history book. And he wrote like an account and did meet with Francesco Melzi to talk about Leonardo da Vinci. So that's how the film opens, is he's coming to kind of finish his book and to learn more about Leonardo's time in France. So, and then Melzi, who's this crotchety old man now, kind of doesn't want to tell him, but also wants to tell him the story. So, like old men do. and then we sort of have fun with like Leonardo's concepts and some of his ideas, and sort of, it's not a documentary, so we're sort of trying to make it entertaining and fun too as a movie. And so, have fun with different types of Leonardo inventions based on some of his concepts and stuff. So when he was in Rome, he was developing mirrors, supposedly for the Pope to like burn up ships and stuff like that as a weapon to like harness the sun's light, and focus it on ships, which actually I think would not work. But he also, they believe, was also trying to develop mirrors to look at the heavens. This is prior to the telescope being invented, but which would be 100 years later with Galileo. But they do believe he was trying to sort of see what this heavens were all about with these mirrors. So we sort of play with that in the beginning of the film too. This is like when I first meet Leo. And there's the young Francesco Melzi next to him. At one point, they end up heading off to France because things aren't going too good in Rome, and he meets the French king, and the French king invites him to come to France. So the film is, it's a cartoon, so I have to play around with scale and the caricature of the characters, and there are these goofy designs and stuff. So I really want kids to enjoy it too, and not be like, getting a history lesson. So there's a lot of fun, quirky humor in it. It's very much, again, channeling the great Monty Python and things like that. There's a lot of some, physical humor and things like that. This is Marguerite, who becomes a major character when he moves to France. Marguerite of Navarre was the king's sister, and she was like a year or two older than him. He was about 20 years old, the French king, Francis I. And his sister, though, was would hold artist salons and wrote her own stories and poetry, and was also a keeper of the peace between the Catholics and the Protestants at this time, and eventually later on. And she even at one point, the king, this isn't in the movie, but the king would in the history, gets captured by the Spanish king during some war, and she ends up having to get him freed and negotiate his freedom and stuff like that. So she was actually a pretty amazing woman for the time. And so I, in my research, was like, I wonder if maybe she was impacted by Leonardo da Vinci. So and I sort of leaned into that more, where the king is treated a bit caught in between the worlds of being a king and maybe wanting to know more about Leo, but he doesn't really have the facilities to do that. He recognizes Leonardo's amazing, but he can't quite get out from underneath being a king. And so, and his mom is still alive too. So the mother is a big character in this film as well. This is still Marguerite, but the mom sort of weighs in on this and controls things a bit. So Marguerite is able to kind of orbit around this because she's relegated to doing womanly things, teaching the children and all that stuff. But she has a sort of secret life where she's helping out the people of France and everything, and they recognize this. And
love it.
So in a way, Marguerite and Leo become these sort of dual characters that he passes on the future to her, and she carries it into the future.
Oh, that's great.
This was a little test we did when we developed this guy, the little puppet, to just see how he'd work, and I had Tim Hiddle did this little test where we got one of these store-bought Da Vinci toys, and Greg Dykstra is a great Pixar sculptor and designer. He ended up putting it together for me and actually painting it really nicely and making it look better than I could ever do it. But and then we built a little set and stuff, and we made this little test.
just to see, looking for lighting, style?
Yeah, Tim said, let's test the puppet, but he's like, make it a little scene, make it a little interesting.
Yeah.
So we put a little more effort into that. And then Tim started working on the teaser, which we'll show you guys for the film. So one we wanted to do was make the test has it's sort of simpler, and then we wanted to do an actual teaser to help sell the film a little bit. We also, with Leonardo da Vinci, when I was working on the short, it was like I realized there's 3 things people know about Leonardo da Vinci, if they know anything. They either think he painted the Sistine Chapel, which he didn't, that was Michelangelo, but they know he painted the Mona Lisa, he played around with flying machines, and he dissected bodies. These are like the 3 things people know. So I already did the flying machine in the short, and we even have the Mona Lisa in it a little bit. But I was like, well, and at this time too, in Rome, he was dissecting bodies. So we sort of lean into this a little bit, which is a little tougher to show in animation in a way that's not gross. So,
but again, it speaks to his world, and
yeah,
he's exploring and
he's exploring. It plays a major part in the.
You
film.
Can't hide some of this stuff.
No, and it's fine, and we do it in a way. So one thing we'd get a pushback from people interested, semi-interested to fund the film, was, well, what about this dissection? Oh, how are you going to show? Is this for kids? And you're like, yeah, it's for kids. Kids love this stuff. Kids love dissection. Yeah. They love gross things. I was like, well, so we did the teaser to kind of show how we would handle it.
Yeah.
So
let's take a look at that.
Yeah. Okay.
Matt, I believe this is the. There we go.
So yeah, it was the old title was Leonardo and the King. I'll have to send you guys the updated.
Yeah, we'll love to.
I didn't realize I sent you the wrong one, but it's the same.
Same. Well, I mean, such a great range of styles.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it'll be done in stop motion with 2D animation as well.
Very exciting. And where are you currently in production?
So we're just about, and anybody who followed the Kickstarter campaign would know this, we are just about finishing up the animatic reel. Well, not finishing, getting to the, it's never finished, but the first pass of the entire film storyboarded. So that by November, we should have that all together. And thanks again to everybody at Kickstarter. Keeps us going. Because right now we're also, because obviously, I mean, the Kickstarter, we made $100,000, which was fantastic. But obviously we can't make a film for that. Thromoni Fantastique was closer. But this, we are,
More.
yeah, it's more. It's not Pixar budget in any way. It's actually a very low end, like European animated film budget. But all this workings outside of the Kickstarter have been going on, like to pull together all the final money. And so right now we're very close, but it's all about lawyers and getting the contract signed and all that stuff. So what's great is the money we got from the Kickstarter actually helps us keep going. Like we could just now keep going because we're starting. Art starts in 2 weeks. We're bringing on our art team in France. We have Annette Marnay is going to design characters and take from what we've already done, take it to the final version for the puppets. And then we have Pierre-Luc Grandjean is my co-director, and then Samuel Rubichon is the production designer, and everybody's getting going in a couple of weeks. And so we're just, the reel is getting done. We're starting to ramp into production as to develop, design, and then start constructing puppets next year and the sets and stuff. And the idea, we'll start shooting just before, like this time next year, we should be shooting by August. So
the 2D elements, those are going to be handled.
The 2D elements, we will be working kind of the same methods like Cartoon Saloons used with Luxembourg. They use the Luxembourg studio that we're probably bringing on. And actually we might be bringing on somebody from Cartoon Saloon.
Got some talented people there. Very excited about it.
Yeah.
Let's take a look. We've got a little sort of behind the scenes. This was a piece they put together for the Kickstarter campaign, I believe.
Yeah, this is a little behind the scenes we put together. Again, we've been working on this for a couple of years, and then Kickstarter was like our next step to keep it moving. So this was we made just to get people interested in the film. Been making stuff to that's what you have to do. You just keep making things to excite everyone. So these people with some money bankroll to go, hey, check it out, look at behind the scenes, see that. So we made this sort of fun video of making it.
All right, let's take a look at that one, Matt. Thank you.
What's going on behind the curtain here? It's probably
Yeah, really exciting stuff.
yeah. We got some great actors too. We've got Stephen Fry on, and it's going to be Leonardo, and Matt Berry plays the Pope. We have Marianne Cotillard has come on to play the Queen, Louise of Savoy, La Mom, and Daisy Ridley plays Marguerite. So we've got this stellar cast. And
Stellar group. That's exciting. And this, the trailer piece there was shot the behind the scenes. This had been done in sort of the Bay Area.
Yeah, this was shot in the Bay Area, so we were able to tap in through. You saw her in there, Kat Aliotian, who's just a fantastic production manager, line producer for stop motion. Wonderful lady. We tapped into her network, and she pulls together all these people. And I knew a bunch of people too, like Tim Hiddle. I knew at Pixar, and he animated it. And we Peter Sorg, who came on to be the cinematographer. Hopefully, Peter will come on for the film. He's right now shooting Henry Selick's next film. So that's been, because of COVID, it's been screwy. But so Peter worked on Frankenweenie, and who's that cinematographer of that and stuff. And we met on this. Like, he showed up. Flew him from England to work on the teaser. He lived at Tim's house. Tim had he has a Airbnb, and so at his house, and that's where the set was for the dissection, the underground area. We set it up in Tim's garage, his little studio there. So Peter would just get up, eat his oatmeal, and walk down and set the lights up, and then go down to the beach, because Tim lives in Ocean Beach here in San Francisco, like 9 blocks away from the ocean. So
not a bad gig.
It was pretty fun. And then our other stage, where we had the Italian, the peninsula and the mountains, that was in Sonoma at a stage, Josh Livingston's stage there. And we needed a bigger space for that. And he had a motion control camera that he got from ILM, like used on, I don't know, Raiders of the Lost Ark or something cool. And we had, we needed a big space for that. And so I would go from Tim's house and drive up into wine country to go check out that stage and drive back and stuff. And it was all when I was starting Poppins too. We were shooting that teaser.
It
was crazy.
Well, it doesn't deter the work. It's really stunning. And now on to a new level.
Yes.
Speaking of moving on, I'm seeing some great questions go by.
Let's answer some questions.
Let's jump in.
Yeah, I'm going to go to this first question here that says, you've created animation in 2D, 3D, stop motion, and in live action. What is the next generation of storytelling tools for you?
Wow. I think what's great about story is the tools for story never change. I mean, I went into storyboarding, and I still storyboard. Even if you do it digitally, it's still drawings and stuff. And even for the inventor, though, I've done like maybe half of the boards are done from me on paper, like these little pads I have that I've been doing them on. I just sort of fill these books, these little moleskin books, which I started on Mary Poppins because I was working on this in between, like waiting for animators to show me their work and stuff. So I would bring those to cafes, and I would just keep working on it. So for me, the tools for story, like you're still writing scripts, which are, even though you might use a computer, it's still, it's sort of just on a paper page. As far as like the next level where it goes to, I think it's all just, I don't know. I think there's a lot of exciting things happening right now. And I think the world, who knows where feature films are going, or theater, seeing things in theaters. Hopefully it's not going away. But I feel like online and streaming has gotten a huge boost from all this. That's sort of a new direction, but maybe there's new opportunities for storytelling within that. And then we also have the gaming world is probably pretty exciting, the way stories can be told there and the interaction with story. So I feel like you'll still need to figure out it's all the same stuff though. It's a character needing, a character who has a problem and they need to figure out a way to get over that problem, and the forces against them to get through that problem, and how do they resolve it or not resolve it. And that's it. That's all life is. We deal with it every day, and that's why we like stories.
Yeah. Let's keep going. I know there are a couple of other good questions in there, Matt.
Yeah. This next question is from Nathan in the chat, who just wanted to rewind it a little bit when you're talking about Poppins. They say, you said about how Rob was amazed at the idea of doing it in 2D. Was there an original idea to do it in CG or 3D?
No, I don't think so. I think he always wanted it to be as close as possible to the original Jolly Holiday sequence, to not do the same thing, but to like be evocative of it. And I think to him, I think my point is more, he being a live action guy didn't really, unlike us in animation, where we know like we can delineate even like different types of 2D animation or different types of CG animation. We can parse it down to like who the artist was who made that scene or film or something. He's not doing that. He's a big fan of Warner Brothers films. He really likes Warner Brothers, like the old Warner Brothers, Bugs Bunny stuff. And he liked the Disney musical because he felt, and then the old Disney films because he grew up on that, and Poppins because he was probably the first film he saw as a kid. I think he said that. So but he didn't have the language of like, I want to do it in this style. He just said animation. So I don't think there was ever, I didn't know at the time going into it whether that would be what they wanted, because that seems like what most live action people want, because they feel like they get that extra dimension, more bang for their buck or something.
Do you, as a story artist and writer and now director, just as an artist in general, what's the biggest strength or the most important quality you think is necessary for an artist today?
I think being, let's see, I think being curious and getting out there and exploring, and not like shutting out things that maybe you don't necessarily like, but you want to kind of explore and see, what was that, like be open to other people's ideas and techniques. And I'm always a big fan of like learning how people work and how they put it together. And I think that's a great thing to be as an artist, and not think you have all the answers to everything, and to just be open to being inspired all the time. So I don't know, there's a lot of answers to that question.
Absolutely. And I love the research that you do into everything as well. I think that does that talk a bit about how that guides your vision for certain projects?
Mm-hmm. Well, I find it really fun, first of all. I mean, I think that part of doing the research is like just learning all these things, right? Maybe you wouldn't use it all, but it's exciting to learn about the histories, and I've always loved that. So it's exciting to me. And then you have to kind of take in a lot of it and then put it away, because I think you can get, and I definitely did in the early stages of The Inventor, was I get bogged down in all the details and then go, oh, I have to like, this happened first and then this thing happened, so I can't put this thing first and then this happened. And it just, you start getting muddled, and it gets, people don't really care, and most people don't know. So it's like, it's more about telling a story then and also it's sort of a story through me as well, so it's like my interpretation of this through my own emotions. So it's not, like I said earlier, not a documentary, so it's like you're trying to have a message through your fiction. So so you really need to get all that information and then move it. Don't go back to it, like just write and like let it out, and then you can go and check some things and see, oh, what was the name of that or that specific thing. I think that would add a nice detail, and then add those things into it. But I think it's important you have to kind of move it away. It's hopefully you've done enough research that it enters your DNA and everything, and you're constantly also got your radar up for new things that can happen. And what I find most exciting is when you find that piece of information that makes the moment a little more, gives it a little more truth because you based it on something that was true. And I think that adds a richness to it. So like Ratatouille, you know, the detail of the cooks being like pirates is true, and it makes it more interesting, I think. So instead of them just being what you might think a cook is, instead of having done the research.
Right. That's a great example. Matt, I'm seeing a few more great questions. Let's jump to those.
Yeah, the next question here is from Damien, who's wondering if there's any book that marked a before and after to your perspective of script, story, and writing.
Well, for sure. William Goldman's Adventures in the Screen Trade. If you are a writer, you must get this book and read it many times. He wrote a second book called What Lie Did I Tell You? That's also good. If you don't know who William Goldman is, you should, because he's one of the greatest screenwriters ever. Wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, All the President's Men, The Great Princess Bride. He's a tremendous screenwriter. And his books are great because I personally am not a big fan of like the Sid Fields and all that. I mean, I think there's stuff to learn from them, but you can get kind of stuck in, again, following all the, like checking the boxes kind of a thing. And that's not what writing is. And you can absorb, again, it's something to absorb, and you put it away, and then you got to just do it. And what's great about William Goldman's books is because he's such an accomplished writer, he comes at it from a different perspective of the reality of really writing these scripts. And such a good writer. So I think reading the books about screenplay writing and even animation stuff of people who actually did the work instead of people who are more like academics about it, I suppose. I mean, I think you can learn from everything, but I think to me those are the ones that have a lot of real a lot of gold in them to mine.
It's
good inspiration.
Source, absolutely. There's resonance, as you said, because he's been there, he's done it, he's applied this, he's seen it work or not work. And
that's right.
So it's a great experiential voice. Those are really strong examples. Are there other resources that you look to when you're writing?
When I'm writing,
things you do just to kind of jog your shift up your brain?
Yeah, it's interesting when you start to pick on a subject and you're starting to delve into it, the world starts to provide you with it. I think your radar is just more attuned to like those things. So you start going, oh, that can apply in this. I feel like it's everywhere. It's just making sure you're kind of aware to kind of pull these things in. But I will, I'll look at movies that are similar. I'll look at, read stories that might be similar and stuff. I mean, you have to be careful you're not like ripping them off and stuff, but I think again, it's like just absorbing and then putting it away and then channeling the story through your own sort of life experiences and your own kind of emotional state and the story you want to tell. So the process of, I think it's just, you have to everybody wants to get to the end so quick too, and I think you need to like realize it's a long process and to enjoy the process. Another great that I stand on the shoulders of is Joe Ranft, who was who brought me to Pixar and was my story teacher at Cal Arts, and one of the greatest story artists ever. And he said his whole mantra was trust the process. And I think that's a really key thing, is to, I think you have to trust and love it. You have to love the journey of it and not be about the end game. Like, where am I going with this? Because it is a long, and you have to let it be a long thing, because it's, I feel like with stories, you have to let that it percolate and grow and like discover those roads and stuff. I mean, eventually you have to deliver it, but
Yeah, working within a deadline is a little challenging when you're trying to let something unfold like that.
yeah, it's a weird balance though, because you do need those deadlines too, because those also help. Those help like
Sure do.
sharpen things and like get you editing and get you to that place and all that stuff. So I don't know, it's all kind of fun. It's painful too.
Yeah, it's not as rosy as one might think, but
It's a lot of work.
I think if it were easy, it wouldn't be worth the journey.
Very true.
Let's jump to some other great questions here, Matt.
Yeah, this next question from Juyan. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. What do you think makes a film cinematic, especially in animation?
Well, I guess the term's probably different for different people. But I guess to me, cinematic, I mean, the whole thing is, it should be cinematic in that you're telling your story visually and not relying on dialogue to cover, to carry your story, or, it's a visual medium. So the bang for your buck is through the images you decide to show. I'm a big fan of like experimenting with like the juxtaposition of images and how those adding, like, it's the Eisensteinian method of film, in that this image plus this image plus this image equals this image, or it gives you sort of a feeling for the audience of like what you're trying to tell, and sort of putting those together, especially with this lower budget with the Inventor. I've been experimenting with that, where it's like not worrying too much about moving the camera to connect me to the next moment and stuff, and it's more like just giving you different visual language of a tree plus a man plus axe. Like, what does that tell you, right? So this could mean different things to different people. So, but in the context of the whole story, it starts to add up to something. So, and also that being visual, you bring your audience in more. They're not being told a story through the dialogue. They're being pulled in because they have to kind of enter the space more. So to me, that's more cinematic. I find that animation does tend to lean a little bit too much on dialogue. I mean, it's true of a lot of movies, but animation in particular seems to rely a little bit more now than before on dialogue, especially for gags and stuff. I feel like it gets a little too gaggy with like great lines, and part of that from trying to sell the Inventor, I think, comes from selling these scripts and getting them, because I think that's what carries in a script is the dialogue. Again, that's where a script is sort of an inferior form of cinema, is because what works are the words, and the thing that has the most words or resonance can be the dialogue. So if you have witty dialogue, or what you think is witty, or funny one-liners and stuff, that like, then the script gets sold, because that's what they're like, oh, this is very funny, the characters are hilarious. But it's like, but that's not what the greatest animation is like the way things move and the way they sort of interact with each other, and the caricature of movement and the caricature of the scene and stuff, I think, is what really makes animation exciting and fun. I feel a little bit like we're moving away from that, as there's always been this need in animation to be more accepted by live action, and to do that is like to make animation more like live action. And then you see in live action it's getting more like animation. You have all these Marvel films and stuff like that, where everything's pretty much 80% of it's animated. Or then you have something like The Lion King remade, which is like called a live action film when it's pretty much an animated movie. But I just find it, I love animation in its purest form, in that sense of like exploring the caricature of life and the kind of pushing it in a graphic way. So I don't know. That was a long answer to your cinematic answer.
Well, it's a visual art form that speaks to a visual language, and they fit well. Next question, Matt.
Yeah, our next question comes from an excited backer for the inventor, who's saying, with a lot of your experience coming from 2D and 3D, what has been the biggest challenge of doing stop motion? And what was it about stop motion that attracted to it when you've already explored the story in 2D?
The reason it's stop motion is, one, I always loved stop motion. I grew up with all the Rankin Bass specials and stuff, and just really, to me, animation was hand-drawn animation with the Disney and the Warner Brothers cartoons, and then stop motion animation with the little puppet Rankin and Bass specials and stuff. I never really did stop motion because there's always this barrier to stop motion that that people put up, that it's like really hard and it's like tedious and stuff. Well, all of animation's tedious, so it's like not any different. It does take, they're kind of a different group of animators that do stop motion, I find. But the reason it is because at the time when I was first developing the script, I was thinking, well, what form would it be? And to me, Leonardo da Vinci should be either done a story about him in drawings because of his drawings. Many, that was what he was all about. Or like, to me, stop motion has that craftsmanship and that sort of handmade quality that seems Da Vincian to me too, like physical things and building and construction. So what's that?
Very artisanal,
the artisanal aspect. Yeah, so that to me felt right. Whereas CG, even though he probably would make a film in CG, because he'd probably be fascinated by that. I just feel like, to me, it speaks to that. And then at the time too, when I was making the script, there was a big resurgence in stop motion films, because I think it was when the first Wes Anderson film, Mr. Fox, was coming out or being made, and there were a couple other like Wallace and Gromit's, the Were-Rabbit, Coraline had been made. Like, so there was a lot happening at the time, and then it's sort of gone. I mean, it keeps going. I mean, it's not definitely an art form doesn't seem to want to go away, which is great. It's more going on right now. That's one of the things we're dealing with, is that there may be a shortage of stop motion people out there because there's so many projects going on right now with it. But that's kind of why I just love it. And it's, for me, it's a big learning curve. I'm bringing on people who really know their stuff about it. And, and to me, I think it's, as long as I'm getting my story across, I think I'm fine. That I don't know it as well as the other forms. I don't really know CG animation very well either, though.
It's always things to learn. All right, I think, we've got a couple more in here, Matt?
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I think our final question comes from Liv, who's asking, what has devoting your life to storytelling given you? What makes it stay exciting?
Well, there's always new stories to tell, isn't there? I think it's just fun. I don't know. It's just fun to be able to tell us, to have an avenue to like say something and to put something out there and have people react to it. And hopefully bring some enjoyment to people, make them think a little differently. You know, it just seems like a good life to have, to be able to do that kind of thing. So I don't know, there's no feeling of like it gets tiresome. I think the thing that gets tiresome for me is animation is tough in that it takes so long, and you are living within a finite time period, so it does feel like to do more, it's like exploring other forms of storytelling that maybe are more immediate. Like I've been writing some children's books and stuff. I had one published through Spain, and then another one is being published through Italy. Though I didn't write them in Spanish or Italian, they're both written in English and then were translated. But the illustrator I connected with, Anna Lara Cantone, she had these connections, so we were able to get them published through them. So it's been fun to like explore different types of storytelling, because each one has. And then I've been working on a children's, like a chapter book kind of idea, and that's been kind of ongoing now for a little while, that I've been tinkering with. And so that's a different form of writing too, because like a script is all in present tense, and then like that's in the past perfect tense, right? So it's sort of different to write that way, and also you can get into characters' minds. It's not about the cinema of it, it's about the more inner scope of the characters and stuff. So that's been exciting to play around too. So like I think, so to keep it interesting, it's like trying different ways to tell stories.
What's the next boundary ahead that you have to push past?
I think, well, the big boundary is getting this film made for very little money and for it to work. I hope people will enjoy it, and so that'll be a big boundary. And then I think beyond that is like seeing if I could kind of get these other stories out there as well, more stories out there and stuff, and keep pushing that. And I think with each story too, I'm trying to push some boundaries within the stories, like definitely the inventor, the way I want to tell it, and the way I think the subject matter of it is pushing some boundaries, especially, and also the way that we're making it. I'm an American making it in the European co-production model, which isn't really done. So like we pitched at this forum called Cartoon Movie, and I was the first American to ever pitch a project there. And they were all like, why is an American coming here to pitch, and a guy from Pixar and all this stuff pitching a movie? And I'm like, well, because this movie, I don't know that could get made in America. So it definitely has a European sensibility to it. So, I think so there's a boundary that's getting pushed, and hopefully, I don't know, maybe they'll open the doors up to more American storytellers to get in there. So, yeah, so I'll just keep doing what I do. I guess it's pushing boundaries.
Well, we as audiences are grateful for the boundaries that you are pushing.
Oh, thank you, Mindy.
Worlds that you are bringing to us through your written and visual work and whatever else lies ahead. Thank you so much, Jim, for your time. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Be well, stay safe, everyone. And Jim, thank you again for spending time. Thanks to all
my pleasure.
Great CTN crew, and we'll see you next time on Primary Sources.
Take care, everyone.